From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
After another year of turmoil around the world, many may be seeking comfort in the spirit of Christmas week. Joining us on Newsmakers for our annual holiday sit-down, the state's most prominent religious leader discussing the latest headlines and the future of the Catholic Church in Rhode Island. Our guest, Roman Catholic Bishop of Providence, Thomas Tobin. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the program from WPRI.com, reporter Ted Nesi. Bishop Thomas Tobin, welcome back to the show. It's good to have you again.
Thank you very much. Good morning and Merry Christmas to one and all.
Merry Christmas to you as well. And we have a lot to get to this week.
As always, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
A lot to talk about.
We want to talk about your 25th anniversary of being a bishop, but let's tackle the St. Joseph pension issue first. Let's get that out of the way. Thousands of Fatima St. Joseph's retirees and employees are facing deep cuts in their pensions because the plan is on track to run out of money. You've repeatedly said the church has no direct involvement in the plan anymore because the hospitals were sold. We just checked this morning, and according to the Secretary of State's website, the Chancellor of the Providence diocese is still on the board of directors that oversees the pension plan. How can you say the church doesn't have responsibility if it still has oversight?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for bringing up the topic, because it is a very unfortunate, very difficult, and very complex situation. Let me say, first of all, as we've said many times, we understand completely the anxieties, the concerns, the fears of the retirees, and all those who have been and will be affected by the changes in the pension fund. We totally stand with them. We support them and hope that this situation will come to a resolution as soon and as quickly and as positively as possible. We understand the concern. It has a long history, of course. You mentioned that the Chancellor of the diocese, Father Tim Riley, currently is still on the board of St. Joseph Health Services. Of course, there was a history with St. Joseph Health Services in relationship to the diocese. Father Riley has been on the board simply for the purpose of ensuring the Catholicity, the Catholic identity, in terms of the moral and ethical directives. So, for example, that the hospitals wouldn't be performing abortions or sterilizations or other things that were contrary to the Catholic faith. There were two other individuals who were named by the Charter Care Board to oversee the pension funds when Charter Care was purchased by Prospect. Two laymen, not involved in the church, not directly related to the employment of the church, any other kind of relationship in an administrative way to the Catholic Church. Father Riley's presence there as chancellor was purely ex officio to help preserve the Catholic identity of a Catholic hospital like Fatima, so that it wouldn't veer off into activities and programs that were contrary to our faith.
But there is no hospital in that corporation now, because it was sent off in as you said, it's complex, but it was sent off in the corporate transaction to the Prospect Charter Care Company. It would seem that their only responsibility of that board has been to oversee the pension plan, now that there's no actual hospital in that company.
But not the total board, not the totality of the three remaining members. There were two laymen, whose names I don't have with me today, but there are two laymen who were chosen and designated by the Charter Care Board to oversee the management of the pension funds. Father Riley specifically was not named in that role because his role was related only to the spiritual and pastoral part of it. And as you say, it's a difficult history. And going back a little bit, when St. Joseph Health Services and Roger Williams came together to form Charter Care. That's about 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah.
3 or 4 years after that, the new corporation, Charter Care, which was now a secular corporation, not related directly to the church or administration, Charter Care was purchased totally by Prospect of California, a for-profit, multi-billion-dollar corporation who came in and took over every aspect of the administration of the hospitals except the pension funds. They threw some money into the pension funds, but then they were abandoned. And that's the part that I don't completely understand.
You wish the church had ensured that the pension fund was adopted as part of that plan now, looking back?
Well, again, when that took place, we had been out of the hospital management business for several years. So I suppose as an interested third party looking in, we could have asked that question, as many others should have and could have asked the question, what about the pension fund and why isn't it being adopted by Prospect? a lot of people should have asked that question, including, by the way, the nurses union. The nurses union fully and publicly supported the purchase of charter care by Prospect. And it was that transaction that led to the crippling and the abandonment of the pension fund. I know the nurses union has been out front in attacking the church, but they bear a serious responsibility for this too, because they fully supported the purchase of charter care by Prospect that crippled the pension fund. So there's a lot of people that have some responsibility, and it's too bad this becomes such an adversarial process. We could have all, I think, worked together, at least in a public way, to try to ensure that the retirees and other people have the pension funds that they deserve and they have a right to.
The pension plan's receiver, Stephen Del Sesto, recently told the website Go Local Prov it would cost, he estimates, $125 to $150 million now to pay off all the pensioners in the plan. People have pointed out the diocese is at this time kicking off a $50 million capital campaign. Have you considered earmarking some portion of that money to help make up for, because this was the diocese's pension plan for its first 40 plus years of its life?
Well, keep in mind again, when the church was involved in managing the hospitals through St. Joseph Health Services, the pension fund was viable. It was not fully funded, I suppose, but it was viable, it was functioning, it was paying its bills and distributing the benefits. It was only later on these corporate mergers that the pension fund ran into trouble. According to published reports that I'm sure you've both seen, as recently as 3 or 4 years ago, the pension fund was funded about 92%, which is really good. It's better than most pension funds. So I think.
But it was inevitable that once it lost its source of revenue because the hospital had been transferred, it's hard to understand how any other outcome could have happened, because it had no source of revenue once everyone agreed to sell off the hospital.
Right. I think we can all agree on that it was inevitable because the money was being paid out and no money was going in. My question is, why was that approved by state officials? And why was it supported by the nurses union? Why didn't they ask that question? Why didn't they see the obvious outcome of how this would happen? So the church, keep in mind, one of the advantages of these corporate mergers is the Fatima Hospital is still there. It's still open and functioning. If these corporate mergers had not taken place, Fatima Hospital could have closed 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, much like we see happening with Memorial Hospital now. The corporate mergers kept the hospitals alive, and that's something that we should emphasize too. Lots of people have their jobs. Lots of people are getting paid because of these corporate mergers that kept Fatima going. Otherwise, it could have been Memorial Hospital 5 years ago.
I have one final question on this topic. Ted might have another, but it's a personal question from a retiree who emailed me, and I just want to read a line to you that was in that email that really stood out to me. She said, "I'm just a little pensioner who will be affected for the rest of my life with a broken promise from the Catholic Church." And you said at the start of the show, you support these people. She doesn't feel supported by the Catholic Church. What do you say to her?
Well, I say to her that there's been a lot of misinformation about this, and I hope that she and many others will understand that when the Catholic Church was involved in this process, in the management of hospitals, and again, that goes back now to 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 years ago when we relinquished the responsibility. When the Catholic Church was involved in managing these hospitals, all the pension funds were healthy and functioning well. We were indeed fulfilling our promises. And by the mergers that we first initiated and supported, again, when Charter Care was formed, those hospitals are still alive. How the pension fund was orphaned and why it was deserted, I think that's the result of this very unfortunate situation between two secular corporations that the church was not involved with. One of the things I feel really bad about is some of the publicity that's coming about. It's driving a wedge between some of these good people, like the person who wrote to you, and the church and their faith. And that's terribly unfortunate because it might affect their spiritual well-being and their commitment in faith. The church did not cause this, and there's nothing the church can do to fix it. But we certainly hope and pray that it will come to a good resolution as soon as possible. But it's unfortunate that some of the publicity is the fake news is driving people away from the church, and that's really a sad outcome.
All right, we want to move on. Another headline this week, actually, which we didn't know would be a headline this week when you agreed to come on for the interview, was the Death of Cardinal Law. from Boston. One obituary on a Catholic website suggested the sexual abuse crisis that unfolded in Boston and elsewhere was the greatest crisis in the church since the Protestant Reformation. What's your estimation of Cardinal Law's role in that and the damage that was done?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if it's the greatest crisis since the Reformation or not. I suppose that's a very relative estimation, but it might be true. But certainly it was a terrible crisis for the church, and especially a very, very painful situation for those who were victims, survivors, those who were abused by members of the church, priests, religious, lay employees, whatever. Even though the death of Cardinal Law, in a sense, has changed the chapter on the sad story for him, it certainly hasn't closed the story for the survivors and the victims of abuse. Unless you've been in that situation, it's very difficult to understand how painful what a very serious and grievous wound is caused by sexual abuse of a minor. Something very, very difficult to deal with and to get over. So as we pray for the peaceful repose of Cardinal Law, as we do in the Catholic Church, we pray for everyone who dies, for God's mercy and his judgment. We also want to remember and pray for the victims of sexual abuse, because this part of the story is not over for them. We certainly hope and pray that through their spiritual strength, they can come to some measure of peace and healing and reconciliation and even forgiveness in their lives. It's very difficult, but that's the ultimate and best outcome. If they can come to some kind of healing and forgiveness to make them whole.
Father James Martin, the prominent Jesuit, said this week, every Catholic, everyone deserves a funeral, but not everyone necessarily deserves a funeral in St. Peter's Basilica, which is where Cardinal Law was buried this past week. What do you think of that decision in the end to have use a place of such symbolic power for his funeral?
Sure. Well, he was buried rather quickly after he died. There was not a long time of waking and reflection and so forth. My understanding is he received a funeral very much like any cardinal living in Rome would receive. It was relatively low-key, I think. They followed the normal Vatican protocol, which I don't completely understand or have a key to, but they followed the normal Vatican protocol. But it was, I think, relatively low-key. He was a cardinal. He served the church for many, many years with good things and bad things that happened. Again, I think of a story that someone who, this is, I think, in Washington many, many years ago, a prominent Catholic politician died, someone who had not been friendly to the church, but the Archbishop there still buried him from the cathedral in Washington, D.C., and someone said to the Archbishop, "Why did you bury him?" And the Archbishop said, "Because he's dead." So when someone dies, we have a funeral, and it's not a celebration of life, it's not a canonization. He died. We had a funeral in Vatican according to the normal protocol, and we prayed for the forgiveness of his sins and his merciful judgment of God. And that's what everyone who dies in the Catholic Church receives, good or bad.
I have a very heavy question for you that was asked of Archbishop O'Malley this week.
Cardinal O'Malley.
Cardinal O'Malley, thank you. That many people of faith may have, and they would ask their priest. And the question to him was, will God accept Cardinal Law's soul to heaven?
Well, we have no idea, of course. What we do know, of course, is that God forgives sins. And God is the perfect judge. He's the perfect balance of mercy and justice. We have no idea who goes to heaven, who goes to hell, who goes to purgatory in between. That's really in God's hands and God's judgment. And we'd be crazy to try to take over God's role.
When we come back, we want to talk to you about your 25th anniversary as a bishop. Reflect on the last quarter century, if you can believe, has passed since you became a bishop. Our guest is Bishop of the Providence Diocese, Thomas Tobin. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my left, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. Our guest this week is Bishop of the Providence Diocese, Thomas Tobin. Bishop, congratulations again as we started the show on your 25th anniversary as bishop, and this includes your years in Youngstown.
Correct.
As well as, I believe it's been 12 years now in Providence.
12 and a half years, exactly.
Now, I understand that Pope Francis sent you a letter on your anniversary.
Yes, he did. It was very nice. I was very honored to receive a letter from Pope Francis on the celebration of my 25th anniversary of being a bishop. It's a beautiful letter in which pretty much he summarized my life and ministry as a bishop in 3 places and the work I've done. And then he congratulated me and also offered his apostolic blessing to me, to all of our priests, and to all the people of the diocese. So we read that at the Mass last Sunday, and we were just very grateful and honored that we received a letter from the Pope.
Was it in Latin?
It was in Latin.
How's your Latin?
Which means that I had to have someone translate it.
You can admit
So
that.
my Latin is not very strong, but we know pretty much what it said, and we had a good translation.
Yeah, I'm curious, 25 years as a bishop, and you've been a priest, I believe, 40,
It will
over
be 44 years next
44
year.
years, almost getting on to half a century.
Yes.
What's the
Thank you for putting it that way. Half a century.
Yes, sorry. I'll go to confession. What's the biggest change in the church, would you say, the most notable one since you became a bishop?
Well, in 25 years, again, serving as a bishop in 3 places. First in Pittsburgh as an auxiliary bishop, and then in Youngstown, Ohio for 9 years, and now here in Providence for 12 and a half years. In some ways, the work of the church and the work of the bishop is always the same. It's to carry on the work of Christ, the Good Shepherd, to teach and to govern God's people, to bring them together into a community, and to sanctify by praying with people, praying for people, celebrating the sacraments. Everything we do is related to those 3 commissions: to teach, to govern, and to sanctify. And I have to remind myself of that once in a while too. I suppose the biggest change, there have been a lot of changes in the world and in society and the church, but one of the things that's really become very challenging is the lack of sacramental practice. Even 25 years ago, it was different. There were more people going to Mass on Sundays, more people receiving the sacraments, more people turning to Catholic cemeteries for funerals and Mass of Christian burial. We're now living in a very secular, post-Christian age, in a sense, where so many of our young people are not attending Mass on Sundays.
Why do you think that is?
Well, many reasons, I suppose. I mean, the numbers are staggering. Something like, and there are a lot of surveys, a lot of statistics, something like 80% of young Catholics drop out of the faith after they're confirmed. That's enormous. And that's a problem for us now and going forward. I think it's a generational change. It's probably one that takes 100 years as the pendulum swings back and forth. In the 1950s, just about every Catholic went to Mass just about every Sunday. Now we're probably seeing something between 20 and 25% of Catholics who attend Mass on a given Sunday. So it's just a change in culture, a change in our secular society. I think some of the scandals in the church you talked about before are part of it. And there are fewer young people. It used to be Catholic families that have 4 or 5 or 6 kids. Now maybe they're having 1 or 2. So it's a challenge for us, and it's a problem. It's not just a Catholic problem, by the way. People are dropping out of organized religion by the droves across the spectrum. So it's not just the Catholic Church. It's a societal problem. As St. John Paul said, we're living in a time of practical and existential atheism. He said people no longer bother to deny the faith. They just pretend God doesn't exist and live without him.
So as Ted pointed out, you have been an ordained priest since 1973. Do you ever miss, the scaled back life of being a priest where you don't have to come on a television show and ask questions about a pension
Yes.
plan and being an administrator of a diocese and being embedded in a neighborhood church? Do you miss that?
Yeah, I think being a parish priest is wonderful, first of all. It's a beautiful, beautiful vocation. And as you know, we have great priests here in the Diocese of Providence serving in parishes and in special ministries. There's something really special about being a diocesan priest, being a parish priest, and interacting with people in their daily lives. I've been thinking about this a little bit as I celebrate my anniversary, because my classmates in the Diocese of Pittsburgh, we're all just turning 70, some of them are retiring now. And I do wonder once in a while, if I were still in Pittsburgh and a parish priest, would I be retiring now? So the basic work of being a priest and a bishop is the same. Being a bishop, as you suggest, has a little bit more of a spotlight on it, a little stronger focus and publicity and so forth. But the basic work is the same, and parish priests have their challenges too.
There was Pope Francis put out a document not too long ago that appears to return some power over translating the Mass to the individual bishops' conferences. And as you know, there's been debate over the newer translation of the Catholic Mass with words like "and with your spirit" was the one everybody mentions, consubstantial, things like that. Do you think the American bishops should revisit that translation now that there's some more flexibility from Rome?
Certainly not right away. I mean, the process that led to the translations we have now, and I think it's about 5 or 6 years since the new translations were approved and implemented in the United States. That's a very long and difficult process. We haven't even started to wear out the books we're using for Mass yet. They're still pretty new. So to start that process all over again would be really difficult. Someday the Bishops' Conference again will look at the translation of the Mass.
What do you think of it?
I don't think it's going to happen right away. The new translation, like anything else, parts of it I think are really good. Parts of it are very awkward. Some parts are very easy to pray publicly. Some are more difficult. But it's like anything else. We need to work through the specific language to understand the depth and the spiritual meaning of the prayer. So if it takes a little bit of prayerful preparation on part of the priest to offer a specific prayer, that's not a bad thing. And if we reflect upon and meditate upon what's being said, we can get beyond the nuances of the translation, I think, good or bad.
This year, if we have these numbers correct, and so correct me if I'm wrong, 19 priests will be 70 years of age or over, and they're eligible to retire. It doesn't mean they all will,
correct,
but they're eligible. How many priests will be ordained this year?
This coming year, we just have one being ordained, and he will be going back to Rome after ordination to finish his graduate studies. But we do have one returning from Rome who is finishing his graduate studies. So in effect, we will only have one new priest coming into ministry in the diocese this year.
How big a concern is that?
It's an ongoing concern, and obviously it's going to change the pastoral life of the diocese, because every year we're going to have one or two ordained, and every year we might have 3 or 4 or 5 retiring, plus those who are already over 70. We're so grateful for those who are over 70, eligible for retirement, who stay on. And also we need to recognize and thank our senior priests who have already retired. Many of them, health permitting, are very, very generous in sharing their ministry with parishes around the diocese. We could not provide the services we have without the service of our retired priests. They're terrific.
Talking about the number of priests will inevitably make people wonder about parish and school closings, an ongoing issue you've had to manage. What is the outlook in 2018? Do you expect any parishes or schools to be closed, merged, etc.?
In terms of schools, I think most of our elementary schools, I say this somewhat cautiously, but I think most of our elementary schools are pretty stable. And in fact, we had some good news in this last year. Our enrollment in our Catholic high schools actually increased a little bit. So that was very positive, and our schools are doing well. In terms of churches and parishes, yes, I think the process of reorganization and pastoral planning will continue. I fully expect in this year that we could see, 2 or 3 or 4 maybe parishes closing, or at least merging with another parish so that they be cared for by one priest. That will continue to happen. That's the new normal for us. And I'm not undertaking a 2 or 3 year project like some dioceses have done, where we try to do it all at once and wash our hands and say it's done. This will be the new normal for us. We will continue to look at the parishes we have, the people who are attending Masses, the financial state of the churches, and the availability of our priests. It's a combination of all those things.
I have a political question for you. It made news when you became a Republican, but I believe you told us this time last year you did not vote for Donald Trump in the election.
Correct.
Okay. How do you think President Trump is doing now that he is president?
Well, he's had some successes, I think, and some things that were not so successful. And some of the initiatives he's undertaken, I think, have been very helpful from a Catholic perspective, and some not so helpful. The Bishops' Conference watches those things very closely, the USCCB, and they tend to offer their statements and their evaluation of how the president is doing. So I rely pretty strongly on their study and their evaluation of that. It's like anyone else in a political position of political leadership. Some things I think are good, some things aren't so good. Some things are successful, some not. That's just part of the art of politics, I suppose.
Do you expect to remain the Bishop of Providence until you reach the official retirement age, which I think wouldn't be till the mid-2020s?
Well, 2023 to be precise.
Who's counting?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I fully expect to be here in the Diocese of Providence. I love this diocese. We're looking forward to celebrating our 150th anniversary as a diocese in 2022. The year after that, I turn 75, so that would presumably be my retirement year. But I'm very happy here. The people have been wonderful. It's been a real blessing for me, and I hope it continues. And I expect it to continue.
Just 30 seconds left. People at home can't see you. You have a Steelers watch on.
Yes.
Did the game Sunday test your faith?
Don't we have to go to commercial break
Yeah,
now?
well, you're lucky we're at the
Well,
end of
it
the show.
tested my faith and my patience, and I think I might have to boycott the Steelers for the rest of the regular season. It's very discouraging.
You'll get over it. You'll get over it. Merry Christmas to you, Bishop.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you for coming on.
And God bless you and your viewers.
Thank you so much. And Ted and I will be back next year with 52 more of these. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.